we're going to be talking about demographics and housing need and how that affects how we do development. So I'm Lucy Greenwood from the residential research team at Savills, and we're joined by Natasha and Sarah. Natasha, tell us about yourself.
Hi, my name is Natasha McIntyre Hall. I work for Portsmouth City Council and I'm in the Regeneration Directorate. I head up a team looking at property development across the whole council. I'm particularly interested in this subject. We have this fabulous opportunity to look at a site which is circa 4,000 residential homes. But everything that we've done with it, we've started right from the very beginning, putting people first. So the part about demographics really is how people live, and I think that sometimes we are inclined to think of demographics as being, you know, what are we doing about the ageing population? Actually, it's more complicated than that. So we are looking at everything with health and well-being put first, and we are including a whole load of issues around sort of inclusive design. And what's really interesting is we've been pushing on like this for a couple of years now on TIPNA, and we're really excited that it's going to be this exciting project. But everything that's come on with COVID in the last few weeks actually has sort of escalated that trend that people want outside space, that they want to make sure that they can be part of a community, but they have the ability to isolate as well. And so a lot of what we are considering is around ways for people to engage and find their tribe, and look after their own mental and physical well-being. Other things that we're looking at the moment are about living and working, trying to make sure that people don't have to spend so much time commuting when they are commuting. So everything that we're trying to do is around that, putting people first and making sure we've got environments where people can get around. Doesn't really matter whether or not they've got wheels or they've got feet or they've got whatever it is that's coming up in the future, hoverboards. Just to make sure that we can actually, there is a space for these people, and flexible spaces. So quite often we look at city centres and we think about how they get used, but actually what we really need to consider is if we've got a square there, can it be multifunctional? Can we actually have a yoga class in the morning? Can we have a book club in the evening? And then are there ways that people can engage with it differently? Yeah, it's about people being part of a community and being able to find their tribe, and that's really what we're taking is in terms of looking at changing demographics in the way people.
Thanks, Natasha. Sarah, do introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Sarah Bailey and I'm Head of Real Estate at Trowse & Hamlins. We are a City international law firm which has got, I suppose, real estate through our DNA. I mean, real estate kisses down the middle and real estate comes out one end or the other. I've been in the real estate world, I suppose, for 30 odd years, and it's a personal passion of mine, is how the built environment actually affects people's lives. And so the demographics is part of it, but just as Natasha said, actually it's about how the community influences where you live, how you live, what is the need of that community. I've always found demographics quite an interesting subject, in that people have assumed it's the ageing population, or how do we deal with senior living, or the student population needs to be in a certain place. But in actual fact, for me, it's not. It's actually how do those different populations interrelate, and how do we actually create that community and create that feeling of inclusivity. COVID's been a fascinating time in that world, because loneliness, I think, has come absolutely to the fore. And therefore, it's actually such an important subject that going forward, how we actually develop our communities and develop our real estate to try and tackle some of those issues, for me, is absolutely front and centre.
Brilliant. Thanks, Sarah. So some really interesting topics there. You mentioned sort of how, yes, there's sort of the ageing demographics, which I think, you know, lots of people are aware of, and obviously picking up that there is a need to provide the right kind of housing for those people, but also the need for housing of everybody and a mix of people. What do we think the mixture needs to be in terms of encouraging kind of those mixed communities and demographics to really thrive in areas? So Natasha, you've talked about some of the examples at TIPNA that you're planning for that. Are there any sort of things other than what you've mentioned before that you're kind of really pushing towards to make sure that it is somewhere that appeals to everybody?
I'm so pleased that you asked that. One of the main things that we're doing at the moment is we're trying to look at people need to be connected, but cars are not helpful when you think about a people first environment. So what we're trying to do is think about that connectivity as part of the infrastructure. So what we've got in Tipner, we try to describe it as a sort of curbless living. So the idea that we can hide the cars away, perhaps in a podium deck somewhere else, but then means that people are free to move around. So instead of walking out of your door onto the curtilage of a car park or onto the edge of a road, actually you walk out of your door into public space. It's a completely different feel. And again, like so many of these older blocks were developed back when housing was just a requirement, just put up housing as quickly as you can. And the normal person was someone who could just get up and walk out of their house. Whereas now we know there are so many people, it doesn't matter whether you're walking out with, you know, you're shopping with your kids or actually you're just trying to negotiate the whole thing with 2 walking sticks. Actually, we need to be more considerate to how people interact with that. So we made one very simple change right at the beginning, and that's formed a very different way of us looking at everything we're doing. We also talk a huge amount about a view of blue. We're so lucky in Portsmouth, and I think I'm a complete advocate right now, and I'll say, you know, if you had to commute up into London 5 days a week, Portsmouth is not the place you want to live because the train line's too slow. If you're going up into London once, maybe twice a week, or if you have the ability to work more flexibly regardless of where you live, suddenly Portsmouth is just an awesome place to live. Doesn't matter where you are, you're 15 minutes from the sea. So when we talk about a view of blue, we're trying to make sure that well, I think we've got 85% of the units on Tipner West have a view of sea, and then the rest have a view of green. So where we've got public space. Last thing on this I'll add is that we've put on, we're extending out into the current sea, the harbour there, and what we've done is managed to create a just over 2 kilometre walkway that's accessible to the public. So we're adding to that public waterfront as well, which I think is really important.
Fantastic, yeah. And I guess that whole walking and community of ability to walk around places and know the places you live in has become so much more apparent to us all during lockdown, and that's what we've experienced most of. Sarah, is there anything that you want to add sort of in terms of the public realm and built environment?
I think that's really interesting that you're doing that, and we're looking at that actually post-lockdown, so pre-lockdown, because certainly I'm in London at the moment, sort of in Camden, so you know, quite dense. We're very lucky that we've got Hampstead Heath very close to us, so we can walk there. But the community has come together in a different way, and I think it's partly because we were walking outside our doors. Yes, all social distancing, but walking on the roads, not worrying about cars.
Absolutely.
So people could shout across and talk to each other. Well, normally, you know, you come out, you put your head down, you're running your way to the tube or the overground or the bus, and there isn't that social interaction. So I think that to me has been a real eye-opener, just living in a dense city, that ability to walk around it has become so important. And I think the other thing is the elder population. I mean, I've got parents who live in London, and I've got other relatives that live out in the middle of the country, but very isolated. And that, so my parents are saying they're very happy they're here at the moment because they've got life around them. They're not on their own, and they don't want to be ultra sociable. They don't want to be going to, you know, communal barbecues. But what they do want is interaction with people. And I think that's another thing that's coming out of this that's really important.
Yeah, sorry, just to add to your point there about being the interaction with the community. So obviously before pre-lockdown, I used to refer to I live in a village, and my interaction with the village on a daily basis was the 10 seconds it takes me to go from my front door to my car and then drive off to wherever it was that I was going, and then I came back and I had another 10 seconds. Actually, if you start changing your relationship with the car by keeping the car somewhere else centralized, and even if it takes you, let's say it takes you a 5-minute walk to get to your car, actually that interaction and understanding, being able to see what's on and see different parts, and, you know, or maybe even just walk a different way to the car. It's easy to talk about when the weather's like this, obviously. Less easy to talk about when it's the middle of winter. But everyone that we've spoken to so far, not most people, are really keen on the idea of actually being able to interact with their community in an organic way.
Yeah. And is there anything kind of related to is thinking about the kind of different types of demographics that we have? We've talked a little bit about older people. You have families, but also single people, people working, people who are retired. In terms of the housing that needs to be provided, is there any kind of trends in terms of that, or things that you're trying to do at Tipner, for example, Natasha, to cater for everyone?
It's really interesting, and I think that we'll see the thoughts around this change quite dramatically over the next while. So at the moment, the thing that's coming through really strongly is that people want their own outside space, and that was something we were really very aware of in the first place, and we've tried to provide more open green space that can be used in different levels of privacy across Tipner. It's been something that we've worked really hard on. I did a little bit of swatting before I came here, and I actually had a look on the ONS website about population, and it says on there that in 2017 over 38% of people were living not as couples. I think that's really fascinating, because when we think about the type of accommodation that we're providing, we still focus very much around a family unit. It's either a family unit or it's, you know, a 1 or 2 bedroom, and then someone might be able to turn that second bedroom into an office. If more people are going to be looking for workspace at home, that's going to change, and we need to be aware of that, and we need to allow people that flexibility. But the flexibility can't just be people will work up from home. They're also in a community. There needs to be somewhere that people can go if they need human interaction to work, but not someone who's a colleague. And I think that we'll see more of that flexible workspace and more of that ability that you can work somewhere that isn't your bedroom, but within your community.
Yeah, I agree. I think a number of my clients have been talking to me over the past few weeks actually about when they're looking at, particularly where it's a purpose-built block, so build-to-rent block or for sale blocks, actually looking much more at what the use of the communal space is. And the whole work from home aspect has become really massive. And in London it's quite interesting because everyone's a bit worried at the moment about public transport. People are still wanting to work from home, even if the offices are beginning to open up a bit. But we've got a lot of very young people who are in studio flats, tiny 1-bedroom flats, where they just don't have, there's no ability to separate your work life from your home life. And if they were part of a block which had some communal space which allowed you to do that, that would also help. So there's a lot of people looking at just how they can perhaps redesign some of that communal space in a different way, because of the way they think it's going to evolve, both in terms of age groups, but also I think in terms of just what the people, I heard the great phrase yesterday, the consumer will finally influence design. So what the person actually wants to buy, the consumer will actually start changing how we design things, because they're going to say, no, I need the outdoor space or the workspace or the integrated social space.
So do you think this sort of whole COVID scenario where we've been in lockdown and experienced different things about where we live and how we live is sort of reinforcing existing trends, or do you think it's going to kind of change things completely in terms of how we choose to live in the sort of demographic groups we live in?
I think it's accelerated people's thinking. I think it's very easy to think about, oh, do you know what, I'll move house, I'll do this, or I want to move out of London, or I want to, but actually having the impetus to do it and to change your life, being able to have that conversation with your boss where you say, actually, I don't think I should be coming into the office 5 days a week, can we think of something flexible? Those can be big scary conversations and big scary moves that you do where, you know, it's quite nerve-wracking. Actually now, the idea that we've all been working from home for 12, 13 weeks, whatever it is, and things have gone on. Projects are still moving on. We're still on the deadlines. We're still working to the same program that we were before. You know, the fact that during this pandemic, we've managed to achieve such great things. What can we achieve when it's quiet and we allow people to work flexibly and we allow people to take a few hours off during the middle of the day because they need to walk the dogs or look after the kids or whatever it is. you know, the number of Zoom calls I've been on where someone's got a baby or there's a dog in the background just reminds you that actually people are people. Jobs and work, that's sort of secondary from that. So if we can change some way or another that supports people to be able to work, I think that that's fabulous. And I think that we have a duty to design communities and places for people to live that help people to live a more healthy and sustainable life.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's accelerated it. I think the industry was talking about some of these things prior to lockdown. Now I think it's become an imperative. I also think it's a moral responsibility of the industry actually to look at some of these things and say, we're not going to go back to how it was before. We are actually going to embrace some of this. And just looking, again, I mean, being London-centric, looking at the issue of rough sleeping and the homeless and how, you know, how amazing within a space of a couple of days, we got everybody off the streets. To go back to that not happening now would be shocking. You know, there's got to be something you can do around that. So there's lots of really fascinating conversations happening at the moment where people, I think, have had their eyes opened to what you can achieve, where perhaps we all thought that was a bit utopian, but actually it's not. You can have a balance. It can work.
Absolutely, and it shows how quick it can happen.
Yeah, it does, and so much of it comes down to political support. And I have such great respect for certainly our local politicians, because they always have to do something looking for a popular vote. They always have to be considerate of what's going, you know, sort of the short-term impact of what they're about to do. So it's very difficult for them to get behind these sort of long-term changes to an area that are going to disrupt people for a while. And I think what has happened with COVID is people have been disrupted, and now they're expecting more from what's going to come, and that makes it so much easier for politicians to be able to support it, which is terrific. And I'm being so lucky actually that politicians down in Portsmouth have been really supportive of saying to us, actually the recovery in Portsmouth relies on development and the council needs to lead the way. And so with our project in the West, you know, it's still moving forward at exactly the same pace that it was before. And what's particularly great about it, because it is so big, actually the lessons that we're learning on Tipner West, we're putting into all of our smaller projects that are coming forward. So we are trying to make sure that health and wellbeing is the centre of every single development that we do. So by the time we deliver Tipner West, actually, that will just be the way the Portsmouth works.
I think the other area that is the intergenerational part of it is also quite interesting, in that certainly if you've seen how families are being separated and actually now really want to come back together, and how that perhaps everyone have got used to working in that very sort of insular way where you're in your own world and your parents are in another world, and your kids, if they've left home, go off into their world, but actually people have come back together. And some of the conversations we've been having, which have been really interesting, about people saying we don't want to live just in a for example, a senior living development. We want that. Yes, we want to have some of those facilities, but we want to be near other life and other people, so that we can actually respond to that, and don't treat us as if, or as my father said, don't treat me just because I'm 80 doesn't mean I'm decrepit. I actually do quite enjoy life. So actually, it's been really interesting seeing how they've wanted to have those discussions. They want to have that contact. And one of the developers that I spoke to last week was say that they have re-looked at their tenure mix in one of their very big development, where they're going to mix blocks. So not put a student next to someone who's retired, but put them in blocks around that sort of a courtyard, so that effectively you do get that social interaction between the different generations as well. So again, I think that's quite an interesting take on it. Not everyone wants it, but it's treating people as individuals and not assuming that just because you're a certain age group, you will all want a certain product.
Fascinating, and so incredible to sort of see that change, and to see the kind of the mix of people wanting to be with other people, of other types of people, and developers sort of making those changes. And I guess that's the challenge for the development industry, to be reactionary and actually meet the needs of what the consumer is, as we've talked about before.
We can't even be reactionary though. We have to be forward thinking. We have to plan ahead, because again, Tipner West, you know, we're planning a start on site in 23, but we're having to design it now. And what I don't want to do is design something now and then find that by the time we come to 23, it's out of date and I'm providing something with something that can't move with it. So we're trying to build in flexibility, and we're having these conversations about, so for example, with the taking away cars and putting them in the podium deck, if it takes 7 minutes to walk, but actually someone's broken their leg or someone has any sort of mobility issues, how can we move them over? So today, the answer would be a fleet of people and golf carts that go and pick people up and move them around. But at least then it's electric, it's quiet, it's slow, and but it moves people around. But actually, by the time we come to 23, there's no way. There'll be something that's automated. There will be a pod that you can call that will come and pick you up. And there will be a managed solution that moves. So it's about building in that flexibility of saying, I know that we can do it today, so it's not a complete pipe dream, but actually, how would we like to see this operate? What is the best way of looking after the people here? And how can we leave a space for technology to help us find a better solution than we've got today? And technology is going to be the key to so many bits in housing developments. I think project managers particularly, we probably need to upskill a little bit and understand a bit more about the technological solutions that exist out there.
It's the whole thing about smart cities, isn't it? So I mean, again, that's another sort of bandied word around, and everyone goes, well, what is a smart city? What does that actually mean? But it is true, it's all technological driven. I mean, if you've got a regeneration project that's going to last 10, 15, 20 years, you can't think of what you need today. You've got to think ahead and have flexibility. And also have, I mean, you know, I am a lawyer, so I'm going to say it, but you've got to have flexibility in those dreadful agreements that are legal agreements that no one ever wants to look at. But if you haven't got flexibility built into them, it's not going to work, because the world will move on. And therefore, I think everything that you do in those sort of large scale projects has got to be thinking about how can you change things without it being a drama. That's for me, one of the key successes. It's a success story if you can change things without a drama.
I think that's a good way to kind of summarize up, actually, to thinking about, you know, we've talked about health and well-being being really important, and demographics beyond just what we know that we are having an aging population, thinking about everybody, and thinking about how important a space is and how you use it in different ways, and the flexibility of that for the future and being able to plan for it. Natasha, do you have anything you kind of want to kind of reiterate or summarize to finish off?
Really is that people are individuals, but they thrive best when they have a tribe. And what we need to do in development is allow people to have that space to be themselves, and to be able to isolate. I was really trying to avoid that word. To be able to isolate should they need to, but actually interact and be part of a tribe. We need connection, and that is really what's going to be the most important about making sure that we're looking after people who are pushing prams, or people in wheelchairs, or people who've got who may be autistic. Actually, what can we do in terms of design to make it easier for them to navigate themselves around a space and feel safe and connected?
Thanks. Sarah?
I think it's just I hope we as an industry learn the lessons that have happened over the last 12 weeks. I hope that we can capture some of the good that's come out of a very difficult period. And absolutely agree with Natasha, people are individuals, and it's about having an ability to have your own personal space, but not be lonely. And I think though that is probably what's come out of the last 12 weeks more than anything, for people who have been on their own, ability to interact.
Brilliant. Thank you both so much. A really interesting discussion.
Thanks, Lucy.
Thank you.